Picture this. You're staring at your phone, waiting, hoping for a message from her. Each minute stretches like an hour. Emotions surge. You wonder, is she still thinking about me? Your mind spins with endless scenarios. You want to call, to text, to explain. But deep down, you know, the more you cling, the further she drifts, much like a child clutching tighter to a toy being taken away. We've all acted this way, in love. But then something unexpected happens. When you let go, she begins to search for you. When you fall silent, she starts to care. When you no longer need her, suddenly she needs you. No, this isn't some emotional game. This is the law of inner gravity, rooted in Stoic thought. Once you absorb that spirit, you won't merely draw her back. You'll reclaim your life. 1. Farewell to destructive emotions. Do not act on impulse. When a relationship ends, emotion is the first to seize control. Pain, emptiness, confusion, anger, or hope all merge into a chaotic current that drives many to lose control. They text endlessly, beg, argue, even cry, desperate to regain the attention of someone who has already turned away. But these very actions, though seemingly true to their feelings, are in fact the clearest signs of weakness and often push the other person even further away. Stoicism does not deny emotion. It simply draws a firm boundary. Emotion should not lead the way, for emotions rise and fall like ocean waves, and if we let ourselves drift with each one, we will soon be swept far from our center. In the aftermath of a breakup, this is when negative emotions become most dangerous, because they trigger impulsive, reactive behaviors that erode personal dignity. The Stoic understands this. It is not external events that cause our suffering, but how we interpret and respond to them. Her leaving does not diminish your worth, but if you act as though you cannot live without her, you implant that belief in her mind. In that moment, you are no longer someone to be with, but someone to be pitied. Attraction cannot be born from desperation. Women, like anyone else, are drawn to the energy of composure, self-possession, and clarity. When you act emotionally, speak harshly, flood her with messages, wear your pain on your sleeve, you're sending the opposite message, that you are not in control of yourself. And one who cannot control himself cannot offer safety to others. There is a vital truth to realize. You do not need to react to every emotion that passes through your mind. Emotions are natural, but behavior is a choice. You may miss her, feel pain, feel disappointment, but you are not obliged to act on those feelings. Sitting in silence, breathing deeply, allowing the wave to pass. This is a sign of inner strength. This is what sets you apart. Most post-breakup mistakes begin at the moment someone lets emotion take the reins. A long late-night message, a call made in drunkenness, a cryptic post on social media. All are impulsive reactions, not deliberate choices, and paradoxically, after each act, we often feel regret rather than relief. Because deep down, we know we traded our self-respect for a shot in the dark. To say goodbye to destructive emotions, the first step is not suppression, but recognition. When you feel the urge to act just to ease the pain, pause. Ask yourself, will this make me stronger or weaker in her eyes and in my own? If the answer is weaker, then it's time to do nothing. Remaining calm in the storm is the clearest sign of emotional maturity. The Stoic is not one who feels nothing, but one who feels deeply, yet refuses to be ruled by it. This is a process, not an overnight shift. There may be times you slip, but what matters is learning from each slip and emerging more solid each time. Silence is not weakness. Not texting is not indifference. Refusing to act on impulse is not apathy. On the contrary, it is the highest expression of self-mastery. When you can feel pain without turning it into chaos, you are halfway to becoming the kind of man who cannot easily be forgotten. 2. Disconnection, not punishment, but renewal. When a relationship ends, the first instinct for many is to hold on. They text, call, find ways to accidentally run into their ex or show up on social media to attract attention. The goal is to make the other person remember them, feel regret, and reconsider. But such actions only reinforce one truth in the other's mind. You are in a state of dependency, lacking control, and unwilling to let go. Disconnection, commonly known as the no-contact rule, is not a trick or a form of retaliation. From a Stoic perspective, it is a noble act of discipline. No contact does not mean coldness or an intent to cause harm. On the contrary, it is a return to the self, a refusal to let emotions be stirred by forces outside our control. From a psychological standpoint, when a relationship ends, the brain goes through a withdrawal similar to addiction. The sudden absence of familiar conversations, morning and evening messages, causes many to experience anxiety, sleeplessness, even mild depression. In that state, staying in contact only prolongs the emotional turbulence, like continuing to use a substance that is clearly harming you. Disconnection, in that context, is a strong but necessary remedy. It creates space, not just for the other person to feel your absence, but more importantly, for you to reconstruct yourself. This is not dead time, but living time. Living fully with what's happening inside, without distraction from the expectations or reactions of others. In Stoic thought, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Applied to a broken relationship, this means you cannot control whether they miss you or return, but you can absolutely control how you respond. And the right response now is not to act, but to refrain from acting. Disconnection also rebalances the mental dynamic between both people. When you're still constantly present through texts, calls, or posts, you remain predictable, reachable, unremarkable. But when you disappear, a void emerges. At first, it may feel like relief, but over time, that silence grows louder, because silence forces one to face their own emotions. That's when the questions arise. Why isn't he reaching out? What's going on? Has he really moved on? And as these questions surface, attraction begins to rekindle, naturally without coercion. It's also important to understand that disconnection is not a countdown, like 30 days of no contact, then send a message. That approach turns the act into manipulation. In the spirit of Stoicism, this withdrawal is indefinite, not to win someone back, but to reclaim yourself. If they return, it's a bonus. If not, you've still won, because you preserved your dignity, your peace, and your agency. Ultimately, disconnection does not mean freezing your heart. It's a chance to hear it more clearly. Only when you are no longer influenced by external feedback can you truly converse with your inner self. And in that silence, the process of renewal begins, slowly, quietly, but steadfastly. 3. Self-development. Become the man she'll never want to lose. After a breakup, Many make the mistake of trying to regain attraction through reckless actions, even lowering their own value. They forget that what brings someone back is not pleading, but true transformation. And that transformation comes not from promises, but from action, from developing oneself in a deep, lasting, and holistic way. Self-development is not an empty slogan, nor is it a short-term tactic to impress. In the Stoic spirit, it is a long-term process, a serious investment in one's physical, mental, and intellectual self. Its goal is not merely to win someone back, but more importantly, to build a self you can respect and trust. A man who is truly evolving radiates a distinct kind of energy. He doesn't need to speak much or overperform, because his progress speaks for itself. Others feel it in the calmness of his voice, the confidence in his stride, and the clarity in his actions. These things cannot be faked. They arise from within, shaped by relentless practice. Physically, consistent training not only builds a strong body, but also instills discipline and self-respect. A lean physique, focused eyes, and a firm walk are signs that you've taken charge of yourself. After a breakup, focusing on the body is a way to withdraw energy from negative emotions and redirect it into constructive effort. Mentally, self-development requires mastering your emotions, managing time, and building strong habits. This might mean waking early, meditating, journaling, or simply finishing tasks you've long delayed. Every small act, when repeated, gradually forms a new self, calmer, steadier, and deeper. Intellectually, reading, learning, and expanding your understanding is a key differentiator. A man with critical thinking, who asks the right questions and grasps the essence of things, holds a lasting kind of appeal. When you understand your inner world and the world around you, you stop reacting to emotion and start choosing your own path. Self-development also shows in your ability to walk away from toxic relationships, to set boundaries, and to never trade your values for approval. This doesn't just raise your dignity, it makes others realize that to be with you, they must be worthy. When you are no longer the old version of yourself, the one constantly seeking validation, the one filled with anxiety, but become someone with clear purpose, living with discipline and driven by a mission, your image in your ex's eyes transforms completely. Any regret she feels won't be because you tried to prove yourself, but because you've become too valuable to lose. On this journey, you don't need to tell anyone you're trying to change. Let your silence and results speak for you. When you live a full, active, and upward-moving life, you won't need to chase anyone. Others will naturally be drawn to you. Not because you've become perfect, but because you've become real, grounded, passionate, and impossible to replace. 4. The nostalgia effect. Awakening memory through intelligent presence. After a relationship ends, many fall into one of two traps: trying to erase all memory or doing everything to be remembered. However, in most cases, direct pressure tends to backfire. Instead of stirring reflection, it provokes defensiveness and greater distance. Meanwhile, there is a well-documented psychological phenomenon with a powerful emotional impact: the nostalgia effect. And when triggered with subtlety, it can revive once deep feelings without a single word spoken. Nostalgia is a natural response to memories tied to positive past emotions. Music, images, places, or moments that trigger recollection bring back not just visuals, but the emotional states once attached to them. When someone encounters a piece of memory, especially one linked to a joyful time, they don't just remember the event, but also how they felt back then. And strikingly, they often associate those feelings with the person who was present in that memory. Intelligent presence, in this context, does not mean seeking attention. On the contrary, it is indirect, strategic, and organic. Instead of sending an old photo with the message, "Remember this," you might share a song you once listened to together, revisit a place once shared, or simply live positively and let that energy express itself subtly on public platforms, without show or pretense. When she comes across these signals, a familiar tune, an evocative image, or something recognizable without your presence, her mind begins to reconnect. Not because you forced it, but because the emotional traces in memory never truly disappear. They merely lie dormant, waiting for the right, delicate element to reawaken them. More importantly, beautiful memories often stand unmatched in the present. If her current life is marked by stress, loneliness, or a lack of genuine connection, recalling moments when she felt deeply loved will trigger natural comparison. And in that process, your image, if recalled with enough subtlety, will emerge as a bright, enduring point in her past. However, the nostalgia effect only works if you don't interrupt the emotional buildup with direct interference. If you message her right after posting a shared memory, or call to ask, "Did you see it?" you've shifted her from feeling to thinking. And reason tends to resist anything that feels manipulative. Nostalgia requires space to unfold. It should never be steered or forced. At the same time, for this effect to truly take hold, your current image must be renewed. If you're still the same man, clingy, insecure, dependent, then no matter how beautiful the memory, she will have no desire to return. But if you now live with positivity, autonomy, and purpose, those memories won't just evoke the past. They will spark the possibility of a future. The purpose of awakening nostalgia is not to manipulate another's emotions. In the spirit of Stoicism, it is a way to establish connection from afar. Through grounded, non-intrusive presence, it shows that you need not say a word. Your quiet transformation is enough to remind her of the man who once stirred her heart. And if those feelings are strong enough, they will find their own way back, not because you forced them, but because she chose to return. 5. When she comes back, you decide, not wait. After a period of silence, self-development, and disconnection, she may return one day. It might be a short message checking in, a casual comment on social media, or a vague invitation to meet. In that moment, many are swept up by emotion, leaping at the chance, as if it were a miracle, after long days of longing. But if this happens and your mindset isn't ready, all previous effort can be lost in an instant. In the Stoic spirit, there is no room for impulsive reaction. When she comes back, the first thing to remember is this: you are no longer the one begging for a chance. You may once have been passive, waiting, hoping. But if you've truly gone through the process of rebuilding yourself, you no longer stand in that place. Now, you are the one who chooses. And that choice is not made from emotion, but from clarity, composure, and inner worth. Her return, whatever form it takes, is not a reward, but a signal. That signal shows that what you've done has impacted her emotions and perception. But that doesn't mean you must act immediately. If you respond too quickly, show too much emotion, or rush to bring up the past, you risk disrupting the balance that's just been restored. Attraction is built on calm presence, and it must be sustained, especially at such a delicate moment. When she returns, your task is not to decide yes or no right away. The first step is to observe. Watch her motives, attitude, and behavior. The return of someone who once walked away does not automatically signify change. Without signs of growth, genuine regret, and a desire to rebuild in a healthy way, accepting her back may simply restart a cycle of old wounds. A person who has changed not only speaks differently, but acts differently. She won't just offer apologies or cautious questions. She'll show respect, patience, and consistency. If those signs aren't present, her return may be driven by fleeting emotion, temporary loneliness, or unresolved curiosity. In such cases, holding your ground is crucial. From the Stoic view, self-respect is never to be exchanged for momentary emotional satisfaction. You may honor the memories, but you don't live in them. You may listen, but you do not need validation through another's eyes. The only thing you need is clarity. Why has she returned? Do you still want that? And how have both of you changed since the last time you met? Especially if, during your time apart, you've truly become a better version of yourself, in thought, in action, and in emotional depth. Then the question is no longer, will she choose you? But rather, do you still want to step back into this? Because sometimes, when you look back from a more evolved place, you realize that who you once were and who she once was no longer fit your present path. In the end, holding the power of choice is not about ego, but about protecting the alignment between your life and your values. If she truly returns for the right reasons, and you feel that together you can grow from a new foundation, then the reunion may be meaningful. But if not, then to say no, with calm and without resentment, is the truest sign of growth. 6. Becoming mysterious. Breaking old patterns. In a relationship, especially one that was once deeply intimate, people often fall into repetitive patterns. She once knew you would always text at the same time, always reply immediately, always listen, forgive, or back down after an argument. These things, though once seen as sincere, can over time become predictable and emotionally dull. For the more predictable something is, the less it provokes curiosity, and attraction always carries a hint of the elusive. In behavioral psychology, people are drawn to a moderate level of uncertainty. When someone is completely easy to read and predict, they offer safety, but no longer spark stimulation. In contrast, mystery, when wielded with self-control, keeps the mind engaged, guessing, and more invested. This holds especially true after a breakup, when one side has grown used to the other's familiar reactions. Becoming mysterious does not mean changing who you are or deliberately creating discomfort. It's not passive silence or avoidance of responsibility. Rather, it is the dismantling of old patterns, growing in ways the other person does not expect. When you no longer respond as before, no texts, no traceable thoughts or actions, you force her to look at you anew. And that shift opens the door to rebuild emotion from a clean slate, free from old impressions. A man who was once easily wounded and constantly pleasing now appears composed, grounded, and more reserved. Someone who used to share every detail of daily life now filters what is revealed and only presents what holds true value. These subtle changes prompt questions. What's going on in his life? How much has he changed? Does he still think about me? Such questions act as catalysts for renewed attraction. However, mystery does not mean creating confusion or playing emotional games. In Stoic terms, mystery is a byproduct of internal development. When a person focuses inward, lives with purpose, shares selectively, and seeks no external validation, they naturally become harder to read and more compelling. It is the focus on the present and the discipline of self that reduces the need to be understood, ironically making others want to understand you more. An essential part of becoming mysterious is information control. You don't need to vanish from the world, but what you choose to share, when and with whom, determines how others perceive you. If you're always present, always responding, always expressing your emotions freely, you reveal too much and strip away your natural allure. In contrast, a curated presence, appearing with intention or remaining silent with purpose, draws greater attention. Mystery also creates space for others to reassign new meaning to who you are. If you remain as you were, she has no reason to see you differently. But when you grow quiet, reduce interaction, follow your own direction, and live fully without needing approval, you give her room to imagine. And imagination, especially when emotions haven't fully closed, is a powerful force in rebuilding attraction. Ultimately, becoming mysterious is how you affirm that you are no longer passively waiting. You act not to be seen, but because it aligns with who you are. When she no longer knows what to expect from you, she loses her position of control within her own mind. And as the dynamic shifts, curiosity, regret, and attraction will arise, not because you manipulated it, but because you truly changed. 7. Reclaiming your mission, living for a purpose greater than romance. In the moment of losing a relationship, many fall into a state of disorientation. The goals they once set fade into the background, and their thoughts, actions, even daily habits begin to revolve around the pain of loss. Yet this is precisely when a core Stoic principle must be recalled. Life is not centered around people. It is centered around purpose. The concept of mission is neither lofty nor abstract. It is simply the act of identifying what truly matters in your life, beyond momentary emotional needs. When a person lives without a clear mission, they become easy prey to emotional sway. And when they lose an important relationship, it feels as if everything collapses because no other foundation remains. Meanwhile, the Stoic understands mission is the bedrock. It is what you continue to do, regardless of who stays or leaves, regardless of shifting circumstances. It is the work you build, the ideals you pursue, the responsibility you carry toward yourself. Things not governed by emotion or the approval of anyone else. Reclaiming your mission is not merely an intellectual act, but a return to the center of your life. Instead of letting a relationship define who you are, you begin defining yourself through long-term goals. This creates inner stability, because when something greater than emotion guides you, you're no longer swept away by fleeting feelings. A man with a clear mission emits a distinct kind of energy. He doesn't need to say he's busy, doesn't need to show he's fine. Every action, every choice, every step reveals it. He's living for something beyond himself, beyond the need to be loved in order to feel whole. Living for a purpose greater than romance is also how you rebuild your sense of worth. When you invest all your time and energy into one relationship, you risk losing yourself if that relationship ends. But when you channel that energy into learning, professional growth, community service, or simply the pursuit of personal strength, you not only recover, you evolve. True attraction lies not in appearance, money, or words, but in purpose. A person with clear goals radiates focus, confidence, and independence. These traits not only draw others in, but also provide the security and reliability that every healthy relationship requires. Once you begin living for something greater, you stop chasing others to fill the void. You're engaged in your own journey, and in that process, you become scarce, not because you're pretending not to care, but because you're genuinely busy living. And that scarcity elevates your value in the eyes of those who once took you for granted. Reclaiming your mission also protects you from silently competing or comparing yourself with your former partner. When you follow your own ideals, there is no need to prove you're doing better. You simply live in alignment with your purpose, and the results will speak for themselves. This not only soothes the pain, but reveals a new layer of meaning in life that no one can take from you. Ultimately, a man not defined by romance, but shaped by mission, becomes someone others find hard to leave. Not because he clings, but because he doesn't need to. His self-mastery, focus, and unwavering sense of direction make him a place worth returning to, not just for others, but first and foremost, for himself. 8. Leverage social proof. No one wants to lose someone the world is beginning to value. Humans are social beings, and this holds true not only in friendships and work, but especially in romantic relationships. One of the strongest principles in behavioral psychology is social proof, our tendency to judge the value of a person or thing based on how others perceive it. This explains why a crowded restaurant attracts us more than an empty one. And in love, it shows a simple truth. Someone who is being appreciated by others becomes more attractive in the eyes of their former partner. When a relationship ends, your image in her mind is often frozen at the moment of separation. It might be the picture of someone fragile, hurt, or simply no longer emotionally compelling. But time doesn't erase memory. It reshapes how that memory is interpreted, especially when you begin sending new social signals that you're now respected, acknowledged, even admired. Leveraging social proof doesn't mean showing off or manipulating perception. It begins by rebuilding real value from within and letting society, friends, and community recognize that naturally. The moments you engage in meaningful activities, are invited into collaborations, appear in uplifting environments, and are openly valued. These all serve as subtle signs that your social value is rising. From the perspective of someone who once walked away, these signals don't go unnoticed. When she sees you in photos with new friends, praised on social media, or simply living a focused, inspired life, she starts to ask, why has he changed so quickly? Why do others value him when I once let him go? These questions open the door to regret and curiosity. Jealousy, though often seen negatively, is in fact a biological mechanism, alerting us to perceived loss. When your former partner sees that others are drawn to you, or at least that she's no longer the center of your world, she begins to feel the absence and threat of losing something. When you display value wisely, this doesn't hurt her. It forces her to reassess the worth she once underestimated. Appreciation from others acts as a mirror, reflecting back to her what she once had. Especially if you were once overlooked, insecure, or overly dependent in the relationship, your renewed image through social proof becomes even more striking. It doesn't just challenge the old narrative, it redefines your place in her emotional landscape. Still, leveraging social proof must be done with finesse. If you flaunt it, posting too often to prove you're doing great, or hinting too obviously that someone's interested, it may backfire. For when actions feel calculated or inauthentic, they come off as manipulation or a cry for attention. Social proof is most powerful when paired with silence, self-possession, and genuine progress. You don't need to show that you're being admired. Just live in a way that commands admiration, and let that reality speak on its own. As your new image takes shape in the eyes of others, it generates a pull that no words could replicate. Ultimately, no one wants to lose someone the world is beginning to revere. And in that moment, if you remain calm, unattached, and unhurried, you not only restore your value in her eyes, but step into a new tier of worth on your own journey. 9. Patient with fortitude, neither clinging nor despairing. When someone leaves your life, the emptiness they leave behind is often immediately filled with hope. The hope that they will return, that if you wait long enough, they'll realize your worth and change their mind. However, if you misunderstand the nature of waiting, you will easily fall into dependence, turning patience into attachment and silence into passive despair. In Stoic philosophy, patience is not passive delay fueled by blind hope. It is a conscious, alert, and self-directed state in which one accepts reality, feels emotions without rejecting them, yet is not led by what lies outside of one's control. It is a waiting not for someone to return, but for oneself, to grow stronger in thought and in action. True, grounded patience begins with the awareness that you cannot control someone else's behavior, but you can control your own response. Every time you feel the urge to text, to act in hopes of a reaction, that is the moment to pause and examine your motive. If the motive is rooted in fear of loss, in a sense of lack, then that action is not patience. It is a cry for rescue from insecurity. A genuinely patient person does not put life on hold while waiting for something to happen. They do not suspend personal goals, freeze emotions, or halt inner growth for the sake of an uncertain relationship. On the contrary, they use that time to build themselves. Each passing day is not a day of waiting, but a step toward a better version of themselves. Throughout that process, outward quiet must be matched by inward steadiness. You cannot pretend not to care while your inner world is in chaos. Therefore, mental discipline is essential for patience to be truly solid. Through meditation, journaling, physical training, and a consistent daily routine, you construct an inner system that stays balanced regardless of the outcome. Additionally, the patient person understands that whether or not the other returns does not determine their value. When you tie your self-worth to someone else's decisions, you hand over control of your emotional life. This runs entirely counter to the Stoic principle that value lies in character, discipline, and consistent action, not in external validation. In reality, attraction is often rekindled not through grand gestures, but through the quiet energy of someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel whole. That person does not broadcast neediness, nor send signals of desperation. They are simply living, growing, and creating a reality no longer centered on the one who left. This is what makes the other, if they're watching, start to wonder, why does he no longer need me? What changed inside of him? Right patience also protects you from a common trap, impulsive action, after a long period of silence. Many can stay quiet for weeks, even months, but eventually break it with an emotional move when they see no result. That single act can undo all the progress made in rebuilding your image and reveal that you never truly mastered your own mind. True patience sets no deadline. It doesn't ask how long until she returns, but instead asks, who will I have become in that time? In the end, nothing is more compelling than a man who does not cling to outcomes, does not despair over being left, and yet walks his path with calm and dignity. That is the highest expression of inner strength, and the clearest sign that you are no longer living in lack, but in discernment. And from that place, you never need to beg for anyone's return. If they do come back, you have the power to choose. If they don't, you're still on the right path. 10. Become the man she once couldn't stand, but in a better way. In a relationship that is ended, the most obvious realization is a sense of incompatibility. She might have once felt suffocated, disrespected, or lost attraction because you displayed too much dependence, weakness, or lack of direction. These were behaviors that, whether consciously or subconsciously, she could not accept. But that doesn't mean you should revert to an old version of yourself to regain her trust. On the contrary, the more effective path is to become a completely new man, with the very traits she once disliked, now expressed with strength, clarity, and virtue. This idea may sound paradoxical. How can you become the person she once rejected and still spark attraction? The answer lies not in repeating surface traits, but in transforming the depth and nature of your behavior. Perhaps before, you were too patient, to the point of passivity. You yielded, agreed to everything, never said no for fear of losing her. Over time, this eroded your self-worth. But now, your discomfort lies in setting boundaries. You no longer say yes without discernment. You have principles, perspective, and refuse to compromise where your dignity is at stake. When expressed rightly, this is no longer stubbornness. It is maturity. Maybe you were once overly emotional, openly showing sadness, anger, or insecurity without control. This may have left her feeling burdened, fatigued, or unsafe. But now, having learned to channel your emotions through inner discipline, you remain emotionally aware, but not emotionally ruled. You don't suppress your feelings, but you don't let them dictate your actions. This new composure forms a far more compelling version of you, not as a source of pressure, but as a steady presence. Some people were once labeled too independent, too distant, or unavailable. But often the problem wasn't independence itself, but the absence of emotional clarity and connection. When you rebuild yourself as independent, yet empathetic, you are no longer dependent, but also not detached. That independence, paired with emotional intelligence, turns you into someone both strong and deeply attuned, a rare magnetic blend. This transformation is not a performance or manipulation. It is the result of reflection and honest confrontation with the traits that once diminished your standing, followed by a steady internal shift. The goal is not to please her, but to build a self you deeply respect. When you stop living for acceptance and start living by principle and integrity, something paradoxical occurs. You become more attractive than ever. A man once called difficult, stubborn, or cold can, through deeper self-awareness, thoughtful listening, and clear purpose, cease being a burden in a relationship. He becomes a model of calm, reliability, and distinct identity. And this awakens curiosity, even regret, in someone who thought they had seen everything in you. If she once left you for being too sensitive, too predictable, too dependent, and now faces a man who stands on principle, lives with intentions, and no longer fears loss, she will have to ask herself, what did I miss? Becoming the man she once couldn't stand, but in a better way, is not defiance. It is the clearest proof that you've matured, learned from the past, and rebuilt, not to win someone back, but to never lose yourself again. 11. Strategic reappearance, not necessary but possible. After a period of silence, withdrawal, and self-development, a vital question arises. Should you reappear? And if so, how? For many, reemergence often stems from longing, regret, or the desire for closure. But in the Stoic mindset, no return should be driven by impulse. If you reappear, it must be a strategic and intentional choice, not because it is needed, but because you are ready. Not necessary but possible is an important mental state. When you no longer need someone to feel whole, you become clear-headed enough to make objective decisions. If your presence was once frequent, predictable, and emotionally driven, this return must be entirely different, calm, selective, and free from any overt attempt to rekindle old emotions. A strategic reappearance is not about sending lengthy messages, making calls to revisit the past, or requesting a meeting to resolve things. All of those acts place you back in the role of the pursuer, a role you relinquished through discipline and silence. A proper reappearance should unfold like a natural, understated event with subtle resonance. For example, a courteous reply in a shared social interaction, a discreet appearance in a familiar setting, or a post carrying a positive message, not aimed at her directly, but enough to convey that you're thriving. The strategy is not to win her back, but to show, without saying it, that you have truly changed. When you return with renewed energy, self-possession, calm, independence, you prompt questions. What is he thinking? Does he still care? Why is he so composed? These questions become the beginning of renewed attraction, if any emotion remains. However, a key element of a strategic return is to hold no expectation of outcome. You do not return to test her response. You do nothing simply to be noticed. If no response comes, you remain steady. This reappearance must be part of your natural growth, not a covert attempt to revive the relationship. It is also important to understand that appearing does not always mean showing up physically. In the digital age, presence can be communicated through what you share, the values you express, or how you engage with the world around you. What matters is the implicit message you send. You've moved forward, you're living with direction, and you are wholly fine, with or without her. If she once left because she sensed you were too dependent, a return rooted in self-sufficiency shatters that old narrative. It allows for the possibility of a new relationship, if it happens, built on equality, no longer shaped by past imbalances. You don't need her acceptance to validate your worth. And so, if she chooses to return, it will be a conscious decision, not an emotional reflex of pity or guilt. The timing of a well-executed reappearance also holds one powerful advantage. It activates the imagination. When your former partner no longer knows the details of your life, but perceives positive signals, she begins to speculate, and it is that uncertainty that creates pull. Imagination often carries more power than concrete facts, and the less you say, the more space you leave for thought. In summary, a strategic reappearance is not a scramble to reclaim, but the natural result of internal reconstruction. You don't do it because you need someone to return. You do it because you've grown enough not to fear anyone's absence. In that state, the choice always belongs to you. Not because you control others, but because you control yourself. 12. Set boundaries. If she comes back, the terms are yours. When someone who once left you wants to return, it's not simply a resumption of contact. It is a critical moment in which you must clearly define: the old relationship has ended, and if anything new is to be rebuilt, it must rest on an entirely different structure, one in which personal boundaries and principles take center stage. In the past, those boundaries may have been blurred. You may have forgiven too easily, conceded too quickly, or compromised out of fear of loss. This erosion of self-respect led to imbalance in the relationship. When the other person senses you'll overlook anything just to keep them, they lose the incentive to respect your limits, because clearly, those limits were never firmly held. If she returns, it is your chance to reestablish everything, not to control another, but to protect yourself. Setting boundaries is not rigidity. It is the clearest form of self-respect. Boundaries are a way of saying, I know what is acceptable and what is not. I know my worth, and I will not trade peace of mind for someone's presence. These boundaries might include how you communicate, how often you meet, the clarity of commitments, how conflicts are resolved, or simply the tone used when disagreeing. If you were once ignored, unheard, or subjected to ambiguity, her return must come with clear adjustments from both sides. Without that, a return is just a repeat. Someone who once walked away must understand that their return does not automatically grant them a place in your life. They must show that they've changed, or at the very least, that they are willing to engage in a relationship built on maturity and mutual respect. And your ability to hold steady, to remain calm and unhurried, is the clearest signal that you are no longer the same version of yourself, no longer easy to wound or emotionally manipulated. Boundaries also protect you from falling back into old emotional traps. Familiarity, fond memories, or nostalgia may soften your resolve, but with clear principles, you remain unmoved by sentiment. You don't reject her because of the past, but you also don't accept her because of it. Your decision comes from reason, from core values, not fleeting emotion. And if the boundaries you establish make her uncomfortable, that is not a sign you're being too rigid. On the contrary, it reveals whether she truly respects you or is simply returning out of temporary emotional need. Someone who genuinely wants to walk beside you will listen, understand, and willingly enter a structured relationship, one where both know their limits and their roles. In the end, if she comes back, you are no longer in a position to beg for love. Now, you are the one who decides who enters your inner world. And that presence, whoever it may be, must align with the principles you've set to protect your peace and preserve your dignity. 13. Don't wait for her to validate your worth. You define it yourself. One of the most common mistakes after a breakup is believing that your self-worth depends on whether or not the other person comes back. When rejected, many fall into a spiral of self-doubt. Was I not good enough? What should I change to make her want me again? If she doesn't validate me, do I have any worth left? These thoughts arise from a distorted view of personal value, one that hands over the authority of worth to someone else. In Stoic philosophy, value does not come from external validation. It isn't found in the eyes of an ex, in social media likes, or in the return of someone who once walked away. True worth begins within, from principled action, from character, from the ability to live in alignment with your ideals, regardless of who is watching or judging. No one has the power to grant you value, just as no one can take it from you. When you wait for others to affirm your worth, you place your emotions and self-respect in their hands. You become vulnerable, reactive, and easily swayed by their behavior. A single reply can lift your mood for a day. Silence can throw you into confusion. In that state, you are no longer steering your own life. You are merely reacting to someone else's choices. Redefining your self-worth begins with one question: who are you without them? If the answer is emptiness, your task is not to win them back, but to rebuild yourself. You must become someone you respect, not because others approve, but because you are living in accordance with your own convictions. When you act with purpose, guided by principle, and refuse to trade integrity for affection, you begin to reforge a durable sense of self-worth. The one who left may return or may not. They may see your growth or remain bound by old perceptions. But none of that alters your essence, unless you let it. Because when you define your own worth, praise and reconciliation are bonuses, not requirements for wholeness. Living with this mindset also gives you clarity if your ex wants to return. You no longer evaluate the relationships by asking, do they still love me? But by asking, is this relationship still aligned with who I am today? If the answer is no, you can walk away without feeling loss. If the answer is yes, you are strong enough to rebuild on new ground, one where both people are independent, sovereign, and respectful of each other's worth. Defining your own value is also the only way to avoid repeating old mistakes. When you enter a new relationship, whether with your ex or someone new, you no longer enter seeking proof of your worth. You bring with you a confidence born from within, not a fear of being left behind, and that makes you stable, magnetic, and difficult to replace. In the end, external validation may be meaningful, but it must never become the foundation of your identity. You don't need anyone to confirm you're worthy, because you've already made that decision in how you choose to live each day. 14. Ask yourself, again, is she still aligned with your path? After time apart, once you've been silent long enough, grown deep enough, and reshaped yourself, the moment she returns, if it happens, will bring with it a crucial question. Not, how can I make her love me again? Nor, does she still have feelings? The question that must be asked now is she still aligned with the journey I'm on, now and going forward? Just because someone was once a meaningful part of your past doesn't mean they still fit in your present, let alone your future. People change, both you and her. The things that once connected you may no longer exist, or at the very least, may no longer hold central significance. And if you've truly evolved, then your values, life goals, and how you view relationships have likely changed as well. This question demands absolute honesty, not with her, but with yourself. In the past, you may have tolerated many things out of fear of loss, but now you're standing in a different place, a place where you've redrawn your boundaries and no longer rely on someone else's emotions to define your self-worth. And from that place, you must ask, does her return help move you forward or pull you back into old patterns? If she's still someone who brings support, understanding, and companionship that matches who you are now, then the relationship can be rebuilt on a new foundation. But if she still lives the old way, thinks the old way, or hopes you'll return to your old role, then it's no longer compatibility. It's a dangerous compromise. And any compromise that undermines the path you're on must be reconsidered with clarity. Stoicism teaches that we possess nothing but ourselves and our actions. Therefore, you are not obligated to hold on to someone just because they want to return. Your only obligation is to protect the progress you've worked hard to build, even if that means closing a door that appears to be reopening. Ultimately, the question, is she still aligned with your path, is not a judgment of her character, but a decision based on your personal vision. And in that decision, you affirm, this life is not directed by fleeting emotion, but by the steady course you have chosen for yourself. We cannot learn Stoicism merely by reading or listening, but by living and testing each principle in the context of our own lives. Looking back on the entire 14-step journey, I've realized that the real point isn't about how to make someone come back, but how I've changed in the process of waiting for or letting go of them. Personally, I once felt a deep emptiness after a relationship ended. I repeated the usual reactions, texting, checking their stories, wondering if they still thought of me. But the more I did that, the more disconnected I became from myself. Only when I stopped, truly stopped, and turned my attention inward, did I begin to sense an inner strength growing each day. I learned to live by principle instead of emotion. I didn't always get it right, but every time I did, I felt a bit more at peace. And it's precisely those small steps that shaped a new version of me, one that no longer needs anyone's validation, no longer depends on who stays or leaves. Today, if someone asks, how do I get her back? I won't respond with a tactic. I'll ask in return, have you become the kind of man she would no longer dare to walk away from? Because once you become that person, whether she comes back or not, no longer matters. If you found this content helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future posts. And remember, the person truly meant to stay will never ask you to sacrifice yourself just to keep them. See you in the next video.